Hey everybody, how you doing? This is Luxeley talking to you from the shadows about changes for Shadow Priest in patch 6.1, where we are, where we used to be, where we want to be. And I want to point out that about I don't know the exact number, it could be 95, 98, 92%, but the overwhelming majority of the changes in patch 6.1 are basically focused on the talents. Now, first the good news. Shadow Priest did receive a few very useful buffs. Now the bad news, so did every other single class in the game, which essentially translates to a rising tide lifts all boats. Numbers, no matter how you look at them, yes, you can manipulate them, but for the most part, numbers don't lie. They paint a picture, they tell a story, and I'm going to get into that a little bit more in depth later on in the video. Now the changes in 6.1, I have to say, are 100% directed at PvE, with the intent of balancing the talent choices as opposed to balancing the classes. And I mean balancing the classes in PvE, who's at the top of the charts in raids, as well as PvP, who's at the top of the ladder in arena. Now, if you're an optimist, unlike myself, these changes can be considered stepping stones towards more meaningful changes in patch 6.2. If you're a realist, very much like myself, these changes serve as further proof that Shadow Priests essentially bring a knife to a gunfight in PvP. Now, time is going to tell the full story. Some of this is speculation, some of this is limited experience, but time will tell. And I'm going to get into more of this into the video later on. Now, with reference to the changes in the talent tree, I'm going to go over the following trees: level 45, level 60, 75, 90, and 100. Surge of Darkness, a 12% chance, up from a 10% chance, to proc up to 3 charges of an instant Mind Spike for 50% extra damage. The proc is contingent on each tick of Vampiric Touch and Devouring Plague, which translates into, I don't know if my math is right, but a 4% proc increase. On paper, not very exciting. In true application in-game, very different story. It's a lot better than anyone expected. And borderline phenomenal, especially in BGs and RBGs. Now, when you add your Mastery and Clarity of Power into the equation, you're looking at a very significant buff that we just got to give a golf clap to Blizzard for. The Mindbender. I love this creepy little guy. Always have, always will. They up the duration from 15 seconds to 20 seconds. The CD is the same at 1 minute. The reason I shy away from this choice is because its minor perk, mana regeneration, is not an issue for Shadow anymore. In MOP, yes. In Kata, yes. In WOD, absolutely not. He can be CC'd, he can be avoided, so I think the other choices are a little bit better in most situations. But my big question is, why does this mana regen minor buff still exist? I've created probably 15, 16 PvP videos of my Shadow Priest running around in WOD, not a single issue with mana. Different story in Kata, different story in MOP. You could even see those MOP videos where I'm running around, you take a peek, I guarantee just randomly look in the video, you'll see me running around with 10% mana. The issue's been fixed. Giving us extra mana regen as a minor perk with this talent is like giving Shadow Form a darker shade of purple. Now the last talent in this tree is Insanity, which was my weapon of choice going back when I made the initial 6.0 Priest Guide, Shadow Priest Guide. And it's still good, but the buff here is 100% focused on PvE, which is the AoE increase, which basically means Mind Shear is added to the equation, so Mind Shear can activate Insanity as well. Now, here's my point. It does nothing in BGs. Yeah, more AoE damage, but the reality is that if you have time to stand there and do AoE and damage in a BG or an RBG, chances are your team's winning, and it's not because you're doing AoE damage. So what bothers me here a little bit, and I have to digress and say this, is the immediacy that Blizzard addressed this AoE issue in raids for Shadow Priest, but then yet other issues Shadow Priest experience in PvP are just completely ignored. The answer is, okay, here. There's another cute pet in the pet store. Go buy it, please. Go buy it. Just buy the pet. Level 60 talents. Void Tendrils received a little bit of a buff, almost not even worth mentioning. They break on more damage, basically. Kind of cool, but I don't know. The problem with Void Tendrils is it's focused pretty much on melee, and you have to get into melee range to use it, which is what you're spending 90% of your time avoiding. So, from that standpoint, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Psychic Scream is a little bit different. You could use it against melee, and you could use it against casters, particularly healers, scatter them about, create havoc. In that respect, Psychic Scream is still your best choice for RBGs and BGs. Probably even Arena, but I'm going to get into that in a second. Psychic Scream's cooldown went from 45 seconds to 30 seconds. You know, a little bit of a golf clap for Blizzard. Thank you very much. Appreciate the buff. It does help quite a bit. However, you have to keep in mind that we also got a nerf to Power Word Shield not once, but twice. And Blizzard has an ongoing track record of compensating people when they get nerfed. So we got nerfed twice with Power Word Shield, but we'll kind of give you this ability to peel a little bit more with Psychic Scream. And why not? Everybody can basically break it without using a trinket, so yeah, thanks Blizz, big help. Dominate Mind is something I haven't used and abused since Wrath of the Lich King. The end of Wrath of the Lich King, which spins the clock back to, I don't know, 5 years ago, when Shadow Priests were once overpowered, probably the longest tenure without being an overpowered class. I was doing a little bit of research on the arena ladder in twos, and I saw one Shadow Priest among, I think, the top 100 players, which really is not good representation. And I started thinking, why does this person have this as a choice? There must be a reason for it. And I got to do some theory crafting and some testing, because this might be something with the right partner in twos that can be utilized to your advantage and utilized as a very big asset rather than a practical joke like walking people off of cliffs. So I want to do some theory crafting. I want to try it out and test it out. And the fact that the one and only Shadow Priest in the top 100 rated of Arena in twos uses this tells me something. The question is, how are they using it and why are they using it? Because it does have its limitations. There are line of sight limitations. You're a dot class. Chances are the dots on the target are going to break it. And the other thing is, it takes you out of the equation just as readily as it takes the target out of the equation. So it's kind of a pawn for pawn kind of sacrifice. Not a great deal, but still, it's better than nothing. The level 75 talent, Shadowy Insight, not a great talent, especially if you're choosing Clarity of Power, which I am choosing Clarity of Power. So why I need to reset a cooldown that is already only 6 seconds really just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And it's not that it's that bad of a choice, but it's just that Power Infusion and Twist of Fate are so much better. Now, Power Infusion, a lot of people in my Shadow Priest guide pointed out that if you're in competitive level of play, particularly in Arena, you're probably talking north of 1800, Power Infusion is going to get dispelled. Well, to the best of my knowledge, there's 5 classes that can dispel something. An offensive dispel, that's Priest, a Shaman, a Hunter who has a very high cost to do so, a DK who has a very low cost to do so, a Mage, and of course, I think I said it already, another Priest. If you're facing any one of those classes, probably in a competitive level of play, I'm talking north of 17 or 1800 in Arena, 2s or 3s or 5s, doesn't really matter. Power Infusion probably isn't your choice because it's going to get dispelled most of the time or half of the time. Yeah, there are kind of ways that you could protect yourself a little bit with it, but the fact is, it does a lot of damage, but the whole key to damage is, are you going to have that window of opportunity to do the damage? And with those classes dispelling it, you're not going to have it. Add in the fact that Surge of Darkness has been buffed, more significant than it looks on paper. In actuality, it's a damn great buff. Cascade has been buffed. And the combination of those two with Twist of Fate is phenomenal, especially in BGs and RBGs. You can have a constant uptime of that 15% damage buff with Twist of Fate, and Cascade will help you do that. Because Cascade is just happy randomness, and it's going to happily randomly hit a target that has less than 35% health sometimes, which is going to reset the buff or basically trigger the buff for Twist of Fate. If you have like 1 second left on your 15% buff from Twist of Fate and Cascade randomly hits a target below 35% health, it's going to reset that buff, that 15% buff, back to 10 seconds, and so on and so on and so on. Cascade will help you do this. That's why Cascade is your choice in BGs and RBGs. And Surge of Darkness, because it's proccing a lot more, and you're getting a 50% damage increase, and you're getting another increase based on your mastery, and another increase based on your clarity of power, all that added to Mind Spike. Well, throw in the 15% increase of Twist of Fate, it's pretty damn huge. The level 90 talents basically are still a bit underwhelming, just simply because in the past, particularly in MOP, actually that's where they only ever existed prior to Warlords, they used to do damage and heal you. Now they just do damage, so I guess I just have that mindset that they're kind of underwhelming because they used to be so much better. Halo really doesn't help you too much in Arena or RBGs. You want something that you could do damage to the targets that are closest to you as opposed to the targets that are further away. You have so many abilities that could do damage to targets that are further away that you want something that's instant cast that can do a lot of damage or a fair amount of damage while you're on the run, while you're trying to peel, while you're positioning yourself or repositioning yourself. That's where Divine Star comes into play in 2s and 3s, because you're not going to get the full benefit of something like Cascade in 2s or 3s, because Cascade just is a random thing and it's just going to randomly just hit one target in 2s or 3s or 5s in Arena. It's not going to really give you the full benefit that it would in a BG or an RBG. And as I said before, you basically bundle Cascade with Twist of Fate and Surge of Darkness, and you're looking at some pretty epic damage overall. Just going to go over the level 100 talents very briefly. 2 of them got buffed, 1 of them is still the same. Auspicious Spirits. Basically what it used to do, the spirit would hit the target, be procced from Shadow Word Pain, which you're not using quite as much as you used to, and it would refund you a Shadow Orb, give you a Shadow Orb. Now it also, but it didn't do any damage. Now it does damage, and it refunds the Shadow Orb. But I still don't think that this is a great choice in BGs, because you're not getting those orbs given to you as fast as you would want them or need them. And in Arena, those shadow apparitions don't really have a lot of targets to hit. So, no. I've seen some Shadow Priests and BGs and RBGs use this and use it well, but I'm not quite sure how they're doing it, but I still think the way I'm doing things is overall better damage. Void Entropy got an 80% buff to the damage, which is kind of significant and not something you just want to laugh at. But I just don't want another hard cast. I don't want another dot that I gotta babysit, so to speak. And yeah, it's got ways of creeping up on you, but I'd rather do the immediate damage, because Shadow Priest does not have the survivability that it had in MOP or even in Kata. It's still pretty good, but it's not as good. You don't have the rolling renew, you don't have the rolling prayer of mending. Well, you could put it on yourself, but it's not as strong as it used to be, and you need a cast time, and you got to leave shadow form. So, no, essentially you don't have it. Now you're devouring plagues by putting it on multiple target is making up for that survivability, but given the choice, I'd rather take the immediate damage over the damage of over time, and that's what Void Entropy is, damage over time. Just because of the mobility involved and the playstyle involved and the amount of orbs that you're generating, you still got to stick with clarity of power. It's one of the things that Blizzard answered, that Shadow Priest said they wanted in PvP, and Blizzard delivered, and you got to give them a little bit of a golf clap for that one. In this segment, I'm going to show you the damage charts for AoE and single target damage for Shadow Priest in Warlords of Draenor, and I'm going to go over what I would kind of best describe as the good, the not so bad, and the ugly. Because I'm a truthsayer, I tell it like it is. Now, my source here for these damage charts is Noxic. Some people say Noxic sucks, some people say it's great. Doesn't matter if they're accurate or not. I will tell you this. They're in the ballpark, and that's what matters. Now, first, the good. Mobility. Shadow Priests are up there with the best of them when it comes to mobility. You know, maybe druids are better, maybe monks are better, mages probably a little bit better, but you know, being number 4 on that list isn't so bad. Sometimes maybe number 3. We have an uptime of about 80 to 90% with our speed boost. We can kind of be preemptive and avoid damage, avoid bad situations, keep ourselves from getting trained sometimes. So we're in a very good place when it comes to mobility. Now, I gotta say that we are kind of like a speed demon. We really are, especially in arenas and BGs. And if you add spectral guys into the mix, it's a little bit extra trickery to really, really throw a wrench in the other player's game sometimes if you use it right. Now, let me tell you, disappearing here and there is very, very underrated because that 1 to 2 seconds is enough to kind of avoid damage, to kind of avoid CC, to kind of avoid an interrupt, even disrupt burst damage chains. So you really can do a lot by implementing your speed boost with spectral guys. Our utility is not as good as it used to be, but still pretty damn good when you compare it to other classes. Compare it to where Shadow was a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Compare it to other classes now, pretty damn good. Who else is going to dispel a Pally Bubble or a Mage Ice Block or get rid of Haunted Traps? Bottom line, Mass Dispel is so greatly underrated and underappreciated. I mean, bottom line, when was the last time you heard someone in an RBG group say, good job on those dispels? Yeah, so you dispel, you had 80 dispels, great job. No, they never ever say that. And that's something that's usually expected of healers, but when Shadow Priest can do it, it really is a tremendous, tremendous asset to any RBG group, any threes comp. Let me tell you, it's huge. Now, the last thing that's really great about Shadow is you can have 70 to 80% uptime with your Twist of Fate buff, which is a 15% buff on healing and damage. And I'm talking about BGs and RBGs, not necessarily Arena. And this is going to propel you to the top of the charts, which is where pretty much everybody wants to be. Nobody wants to be at the bottom of the charts and say, look how many dispels I have. Okay, great. But it's the damage that gets noticed. It's the damage that gets the compliments. It's the damage that people like to see. And it's a necessity. And you can top the charts in RBGs and BGs very simply by keeping that uptime. And what's going to help you do that is the build that I recently just gave you here, which is Surge of Darkness with Cascade and, of course, Twist of Fate. The three of them work very, very well together, and it's going to help you to maintain that 15% buff. Now I'm going to talk about the not so bad, which is kind of like finding a $10 bill instead of a $20 bill. Still a good thing. First and foremost, our single target heals are adequate. Our multi-target heals are pretty damn good. And that's mostly because of Twist of Fate mixed in with Vampiric's Embrace. Vampiric's Embrace is one of those cooldowns that is kind of high at 3 minutes, but you wish it was lower, and that's a good thing. It just says the cooldown is pretty darn good. A lot of other hybrid casters kind of lost the oomph on their AoE heals, on their multi-target heals. We really didn't. If you throw in Palm and you throw in Vampiric's Embrace and you have a couple of Devouring Plagues up with Twist of Fate, it's a pretty huge heal. Not only for yourself, but for your team, whether in Arena, RBGs, doesn't matter. Everybody's getting healed. And it's the kind of thing that can turn the tides in a game. It's the kind of thing that can help mitigate some of that big burst damage that's coming your way. So, yeah. It's not so bad, our multi-target heals. Another not so bad is having a spammable dispel. That means you could just like stand there and take away hots, take away buffs, take away absorbs, take away just about everything. Take away the target's firstborn. It's great for helping kill. I was going to say kill. What's kill? Kill healers. Absolutely great. Another not so bad thing about Shadow is our dot protection. Vampiric's Touch. The horrify that happens when it's dispelled. It creates havoc. Another thing that's not so bad is that kind of dot pressure that we're going to be putting on targets. Because in BGs, RBGs, you're dotting everybody that you could find, and that puts pressure on healers. And let me tell you something, I've been playing a healer quite a bit, and healers are very pragmatic because they don't always have the time or the opportunity to do exactly what they have to do, what they need to do. So they're very pragmatic, and they do what they can do. And what I mean by that is they'll top off a target as they see the damage is being taken, which is kind of like immediate damage. But it's those dots that creep up on you from affliction locks, from boomkins, from fire mages, survival priests, and of course shadow priests. Those dots creep up on you, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, you know, I should have healed this guy when he was at 80% health. Now he's at 20. I got problems. Yeah, you do. Because our last not so bad thing is we have what I'd like to call closing ability. We can kill a target better than most, perhaps the best in the game. Maybe hunters are better at finishing targets, maybe not. It's an argument for another video, but as far as Shadow goes, this is one of the things I love about Shadow, because with Twist of Fate and Surge of Darkness and double proc on Shadow Word Death, targets are going down. They're going down, and that's what I call closing ability. It's pretty cool. So all this, not so bad. And now comes the fun part, the really ugly. I'm going to tell it like it is. I'm not pulling any punches. Back in MOP, we were ranked last or second to last in pretty much every eye level of single target damage, last or dead last for 2 years. We started out Warlords of Draenor, probably ranked around 9 or 10, basically the top of the middle tier in single target damage. Not bad. I'd sign off on it in a heartbeat, and I did, and it was good. The problem is that Blizzard buffed everybody else and basically just let us collect dust. So now look where we are. We're either third to last, second to last, or dead last in pretty much every single target category. Again, here's the deal. This particular chart has a 24% differential from the bottom DPS number to the top DPS number. That's huge. That number shouldn't even be half. That number should be 10%. So in other words, right now, a survival hunter should be probably only 10% better than an assassination rogue. But that's not the case. It's about 24% better. Granted, these numbers aren't completely accurate, but they're in the ballpark. And in the ballpark, 24% difference from top to bottom is pathetic. And I understand somebody's got to be there, but why do we got to be there 3 years in a row? No one can answer that. Next thing that I think is really bad about Shadow is the fact that we have to leave Shadow form to get some big heals, a flash heal, or a cast Prayer Mending. And this isn't good, because chances are we just got our teeth kicked in by a melee cleave, and we're running for our life, and we desperately need the heal, and maybe can't completely get away. Now we're in a conundrum, and if we leave Shadow form, we're just basically helping the melee finish us off, because we're losing 50% of our armor. But here's the real kicker. Moonkins can heal all day long in Moonkin form, and that's the equivalent of mail armor. Shadows have to leave Shadow form, which is the equivalent of leather armor, to heal. Huh? How does that make sense? I don't know who said this was fair, who said this is reasonable, but obviously they're on drugs. Another thing that's kind of bad about Shadow is we're highly melee vulnerable. We have a conundrum, because we could either take a speed boost or we could use Phantasm to remove our impairment effects. And the truth is we need both, and we can't have it. But the reality is that Warlocks and Elemental Shaman have the same problem. Mages, Moonkins don't. Okay, it's something I can live with. But here's another problem with Shadow, and that is that all RCC is pretty much melee range stuff. Void Tendrils, got to run up melee range to use it. Psychic Scream, melee range to use it. Yes, we have a Silence. Yes, we have Horrify. But when you're stepping out of the gate in Arena, you don't have that CC on demand. I'm not saying it has to be instant cast. I'm not saying it has to be spammable like a Poly, like a Fear, like a Cyclone. All I'm saying is, let's have something. Let's have something that we could use on demand, because you could pop a Mind Blast and get one Shadow Orb up and hit Psychic Horror, but it's not really helping much. You need at least two, and then when you throw Psychic Horror with 2, you wish you did it with 3. So the point is, We need something that we could use on demand as a range CC. Another thing that is really bad about Shadow, pretty damn ugly about Shadow, is we're only one of, I think, 3 classes, 3 DPS classes out of 20-some, 26 of them. I don't know exactly the exact number. But I think Sub-Rogues and Fire Mages and Shadow Priests are the only 3 classes, DPS classes in the game that don't have a short-term buff. A cooldown that's short-term, that's a buff. One of 3 classes that don't have it. That's pretty much pathetic. It really is. And that probably explains why we are where we are with single target damage. I don't know necessarily. I have ideas how to fix this, and I want to hear your ideas of how something like this could be fixed. And the last thing I want to talk about that I think is kind of ugly about Shadow, believe it or not, is dispersion. Dispersion is obviously a necessity. It's huge in the sense you remove, disperse 90% damage reduction. Who doesn't love that? It's great. But here's the problem. You get stunned, you get feared, you get snared, you get rooted. You're not getting away. Can you avoid damage significantly? Yes, you can. Sometimes do they avoid you? Yes, they do. But sometimes they don't. They just stun you, they just root you, they just snare you, and just wait. And when you come out of dispersion, you can't do anything because you're stunned. So that's a problem. That's a huge, huge problem, because even a mage can ice block, and he can heal within that ice block, and he can go invisible, and he can blink away. So, I don't know. I think something does need to be done with dispersion. I have a few ideas about that. And like I said, I'm going to save that for another video, and I'd like to hear your ideas about that. I want to hear your ideas about how Shadow Priest can be fixed, because I want to make a video on that. And I already have a whole thing outlined out, but I want to contribute your thoughts. I want to contribute what your experience is. And another thing I want to make a video on is what comps work for Shadow Priest and 2s. The comps are very, very limited. Yeah, 3s we know, the God comp, and your role is dispelling and dotting and dot protection, etc., etc. That has a place. That has that's a place for you to shine. We're talking 2s. 2s is tough for Shadow Priest. 2s is a fucking nightmare for Shadow Priest right now. The best spec for a Shadow Priest in 2s is being a Disc Priest. I tell it like it is. It's horrible. If you can find somebody reliable or someone skilled to play with, it can be fixed. I do have a few theories of what can be done, and I'd like to test them. But the problem is I can't find people who are reliable, and I can't find people who are skilled. I can't find a combination of both. Sometimes I get a guy who's skilled, and he doesn't log in for 2 months. And sometimes I get a guy who's reliable who really isn't that skilled and doesn't really want to learn. And it's been very, very frustrating. I've had people make promises to me that they were going to help me out a bit. They're MIA. So I got to do it myself, so that means it could be done tomorrow, it could be done next week, it could be done next month, it may never get done. But I do have a few theories, a few very promising theories, a few very different builds that I think just might work with the right comp. So if you have a comp out there that works for you in 2s, leave it in the comments, share it with us, and I think that's about it. I'm done rambling, people. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hopefully you learned something. Maybe you could teach me something. Either way, whatever it is by you, morning, afternoon, or night, make it great. Luxeley out.